My name is Michael Knipp, and we are here for my January wrap-up for 2020. Man, it feels weird to say 2020 still. I don't know if I'll ever get used to that, because that's supposed to be a futuristic date. I'm old. This was a bit of a crazy month for me, because we had a baby! Tessa Noelle Knipp was born on January 11th at 12:05 a.m. She weighed 8 pounds. 8.5 pounds-ish. I don't remember the exact weight because I'm a bad person. But she is healthy. Amanda is healthy. It was a little hectic when she was born because at the time that she was born, my son had some kind of stomach bug and he was throwing up. And so he wasn't allowed to come see us in the hospital, but he seemed like he was better when we brought the baby home from the hospital. My son then we all had like half a day together. Then my son threw up the next morning and he had other stomach problems. And so it was 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. I threw him in the car. I was getting a little symptomatic and we drove to my mom's house and stayed at my mom's house for over 24 hours until his symptoms kind of cleared up. And then we brought him back home and then he was still having problems with, it was a crazy thing. And we had to keep him separated from the baby. Plus we were getting used to the baby and the baby wasn't sleeping. But everything is good now. We are healthy, a few coughs notwithstanding. And I will put some pictures of the baby up here if that's the kind of thing that you're excited about. I'm excited about her because she's my new baby daughter. In case you're curious, Molly, my oldest, loves having a baby sister. She is doting on her all the time. It's like a real life baby doll. We already had to institute a rule where she can only change the baby's outfit once a day because she wanted to just cycle through all of her clothes like a baby doll. Also, my son loves his little baby. Charlie loves his little baby sister, Tessa. He likes to take care of her and hold her, and he's very sweet as well. Now, hard shift to reading. I did pretty good on my TBR. All things considered, I did really good on my TBR, and I read 10 books in the month of January, and I'm really happy with that. That was kind of insane. It helped that I was quarantined that one time, which is when I read a lot of the Scythe's books. I also read some middle grade books. We'll see what we get there, but let's just jump into it. As I already mentioned, the Scythe books. I read the Scythe trilogy. Well, I had already read the first one. I read Thunderhead and The Toll while we were sick, and I have a review for that whole series. There's some non-spoiler discussion and some spoiler discussion. I'm going to link that up in the card above me. Needless to say, if you didn't watch that video, I loved it. I loved the themes and the ethical questions and things that it brings to mind, and it's a real thinker of a book, which is something that I really like to read, and so, I really like that. On top of that, I had talked about in my TBR video that I was going to be doing the Narnia read-along with Faye from Mystery Date with a Book, and I haven't actually joined any discussions about those books, but I have kept up and I've read up through Prince Caspian. Now this series was really, really important to me when I was growing up because it was my first exposure to fantasy. Being a Christian with my faith, it's very allegorical. In fact, I didn't realize until I was on BookTube that people that weren't Christians liked this book at all because I thought that the allegory was just so overwhelmingly heavy and preachy in parts that I didn't know if other people would be able to enjoy it. It seems like other people are able to enjoy it, but in addition to the spiritual themes, this was like one of the big heavy inspirations of fantasy for me. And I remember the first time that I watched the movie, and I don't mean the new movie, I mean like the BBC old movie for the Chronicles of Narnia. I was like, what is this story where someone walks into a closet and comes out in another world? This is amazing. And I read the book, and the first time I was exposed to The Magician's Nephew, there is some stuff in The Magician's Nephew that blew my little small Michael mind, and I have been inspired creatively and in my taste and interest by the things that I find in The Magician's Nephew, specifically things having to do with the wood between the worlds and the pools and the different worlds, and then they go to a dead world. I once heard someone say that in a story, a graveyard is way more interesting than a castle in a city that's living with people. And that, if you want to see an example of that, read about Charn in The Magician's Nephew. What an incredible, fun tangent that kind of goes on. It's not a tangent, it's part of the main story, but man, I love The Magician's Nephew. I love how that works there. I'd originally planned on trying to make like individual videos for the Narnia books, but I was basically out of commission on booktube this entire month, and so I think that's going to have to do with that stuff for now. Maybe moving forward, I can talk more about Narnia. Actually, here's the thing. If you guys want me to make more videos about the Narnia books, whether individually or as a series, let me know, because I'm willing to do it, but also I don't know if anyone hasn't read it or would care to watch those. If you want to see me make more videos on Narnia, let me know. At the end of last year, I started reading The Great Hunt, the second book in the Wheel of Time, and I finished it this month. Man, that was an awesome book. With the first Wheel of Time book, I kind of liked what was happening, but it seemed like it was just kind of a little bit of a retelling of some familiar territory, which is known. That's what it was supposed to be. But at the same time, the pacing was a little slow, fast. It threw me off. The Great Hunt, now that I'm familiar with the world and the characters, and I didn't have to do as much, now I didn't have to put so much effort into understanding just what the context of what was happening was, I was able to enjoy The Great Hunt a lot. And it took a lot of self-control not to immediately jump into the next book, because it's on a roll, man. In addition to the Narnia read-along that I was participating in, I also was participating in the Analong. I'll put it correctly above me and in the thing below. But I also am participating in a read-along where we're reading the Anne. I don't know what the series is called, but the book's about Anne of Green Gables, Anne of Avonlea. This month in January, we read Anne of Green Gables. It's not necessarily a book I would just immediately have chosen, but I'm trying to expand my horizons a little bit, especially with some classics. I was kind of familiar with this story because I remember at one point a long time ago when I was a small child, I was at my grandparents' house and we were sick, and it was snowy and we were sick, so we could not leave. And my brother had the Kung Fu Panda Nintendo DS game, and I was stuck in the house, and PBS was running their like their telethon where they raise a bunch of money, and they just ran the Anne of Green Gables miniseries all day long, and I watched it while I also beat the Kung Fu Panda Nintendo DS game. Which is to say, I don't remember anything about it at all, and I read this book kind of having no clue what to expect, and it was just so fun and so affecting. Just incredibly powerful. Right from the beginning, I had my heartstrings tugged. I don't know if it's because I'm a father now and I have daughters, but I just immediately fell in love with the character of Anne and the situation that she was in. You immediately sympathize with her, and then you start to get to know the characters in the story, and you get to watch her grow up, and you get to watch the situation that she's in. This is the first time I think I've ever read a book that was just so incredibly character driven. I didn't really understand fully until this point what a character driven story versus what a plot driven story was, because I have never read a story that was so character driven until I read Anne of Green Gables. It was at parts, it was a little bit, I would find myself going, where is this story going? It's not going anywhere. I'm just kind of seeing vignettes into periods in her life, but I came to love that. And ultimately, when we get to that part at the end, I don't know if I can spoil a book that's that old. I don't know if it matters, but there's a part at the end where something just extremely sad happens. It broke me. I completely broke down, full on ugly cries. I was in quarantine at that point. I was laying in the bedroom in my parents' guest bed, and I was weeping real tears. I had to put the book down. I was a complete mess. Moving on from that, now I am really looking forward to reading the next book, Anne of Avonlea, next month. Thank you to Tia and all the books and the Curly Reader for hosting that read along. These are books I wouldn't have experienced otherwise if it wasn't for this read along, and I'm glad to be being able to do this in a group and see everybody's reactions. And Tia actually has a really great video where she talks about her emotional response to this book. I'm going to link that down below. It's beautiful, and it is also very emotional. I got one more book left to talk about, and I feel like I owe someone a little bit of credit, and that credit is due to Deanie. the wonderful person who is such an encouraging force in booktube, especially in the small booktube community that I've become part of. She's very encouraging. She's a lot of fun. Her videos have a really quirky personality that she's all around one of the best souls here on booktube. And really early on, when I was looking for booktube friends, I found one of her videos and I commented on it, and she recommended the book Kings of the Wild. What she said about it and the summary when I looked it up on Goodreads sounded really interesting, and I put it on my TBR. And it wasn't until much later, I'm sorry, Deanie, but I waited too long. I put it off until I was like, oh, why don't I just see if my library has it? And it was almost available immediately, so I got Kings of the Wild. Now, if you're not familiar with Kings of the Wild, this one isn't as well known as some of the other books that I've been talking about. Kings of the Wild is about a bunch of old guys who used to, when they were younger, be like traveling heroes. They were like a fellowship, a party of traveling heroes. They all had their, it's like a Dungeons and Dragons group. They had the different classes. You had your warrior, your tank, your rogue, maybe your barbarian, and your wizard. These boys traveled the world when they were young, and they had a bunch of amazing adventures, and they got old and retired, and they settled down into new lives. And an event happens that causes them to have to get the band back together, and they have to go on one more epic quest. And it is a blast. This is a fantasy story that I feel like maybe my brain is tainted because I have read a lot of fantasy and I'm familiar with Dungeons and Dragons and some of the monsters they're talking about. But I feel like this book is a lot less intimidating to jump into because the writing style and the very much like the vibe of the whole story is not as... Well, for one, it's not as heady and serious. The book is like very, the author Nicholas Eames wanted it to be more like a band story. So like it's a little bit crazy. There's a lot of humor because these guys are old. There's a lot of humor because they are coming across people that they knew before. There's a lot of humor because it's just ridiculous and the characters are found in ridiculous situations. They go on a crazy adventure, but at the same time, and many people have pointed this out, it's incredibly touching, and it will make you laugh and cry, sometimes at the same time, sometimes on the same page. It's touching in a weird way, considering how like brash and crude some of the humor can be. It is truly a sweet story at the core. I gave this book a solid 4 stars, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who thinks that sounds kind of interesting. Once again, props goes to Deanie for finding this for me. Daniel Green reminded me that Deanie had told me to put on my TBR, and so I'm not giving Daniel Green any credit. He's way too big. Give it all to Deanie. And yeah, that brings the count I had to 10. I read 10 books this month, and considering that my Goodreads goal is 60 books, that's really, really good. Once again, I think that was a weird anomaly because I was off for 2 weeks, but I was also taking care of a baby. I don't know. One last thing that I will mention is that I had the book The Way of Kings on my TBR for this month. I started The Way of Kings. Now I'm going to contradict some of the things that I just said because I loved all these books that I talked about. I started The Way of Kings, and how do I say this? There's a thing, I'm talking to readers here, so you might know what I'm talking about. There's a thing in life called delayed gratification, where it's a level of how much you're willing to put off immediate gratification for something better in the future. When it comes to delayed gratification, I am broken. I'm a busted person because sometimes I'm willing to just like delay my gratification for no reason. Here, let me just explain what I'm talking about. I have a feeling that the Stormlight Archive is going to be one of my favorite things of all time. I'm getting that vibe from every single person that's read it. I'm getting that vibe from the way that it seems like it's going to be. And now that I've started the book, I'm almost positive this is going to be like one of my favorite things ever. And because I know it's going to be one of my most favorite things ever, I'm like, oh, I'm going to put this off until I need it or until I have nothing else to worry about. Which is to say that I'm barely reading the book at all, even though in some ways, it's my favorite thing that I am reading. I have both the audiobook and I'm also reading the Kindle version, but I've barely touched it. I think I'm maybe close to 20%, but It's a huge book, so there's still so much book left. But the thing is, because I own it, I've pushed it to the very back burner, even though, especially with the point of the story that I'm at right now, it's kind of all I want to read, which is not to discount how good all of the books I just talked about were. But I kind of want to read this more than any of the other books that I'm reading still. But at the same time, I feel like there's read-alongs that I've joined that I want to continue participating in. So it just kind of gets pushed on the back burner, which is to say I didn't finish it. I'm hoping to finish it next month. Maybe I'm going to reprioritize things. I don't know, but I really want to read The Way of Kings. And also, it's all I want to read. I don't want to do anything else right now. I kind of just want to stop doing everything and read The Way of Kings. But I want to stay on track with the things that I've committed to. I'm weird. Thank you for watching. What did you think about any of the books that I mentioned? Have you read any of them? Do you like any of them? Have you heard of Kings of the Wild? Did I convince you about any of them? Do you want me to make more videos about the Narnia books? Let me know, please, in the comments below. You can also leave a thumbs up if you like this video. And hey, if you want to see more of my content, please hit that subscription button. You can click the bell if you'd like to get notified anytime I post a new video. I hope you are all having an awesome day. I love you all. Bye.
I must confess that my loneliness is killing me now. Don't you know I still believe that you will be here and give me a sign. Hit me, baby.